Well, we also like to tell companies the truth, but from a different angle. I've been a journalist and a researcher and a writer. I'm very, very interested in the workplace, mainly because we spend most of our lives there. And if you look at other forms of other environments and other spaces and the objects within them, they have far more design attention historically, domestic space, public space, and so on. And I think now the workplace is becoming a center of intense design activity, and I think that's all to the good. I, for the last 14 years, have run a research center at the Royal College of Art. It's the college's largest and longest running center for design research. It's funded by the Helen Hamlin Trust. And we have over 30 designers who are carrying out research functions in an interdisciplinary environment. So we have architects, we have design engineers, we have graphic designers, textile artists. We also employ psychologists and social anthropologists. And we are very interested in how people behave in space. We're interested in how people relate to the material world around them. And when it comes to the workplace, we're very interested in creating a more humane, a more user-centered office design. And I think we've had periods where we've had a technology-driven office. We've certainly had a design-driven or a style-driven workplace, but we've never really had a people-centered workplace. We've had a management-centered workplace, but that's not quite the same thing. And I think the next era of office design is going to be around a user-centered, really understanding the relationship between what people want and how people really work, especially in an age of digital technology, and the kind of space plans and environments that are created by architects and designers. At the moment, I think there's a gap. And the work that we've been doing for Herman Miller has been around closing this gap between user research and a design framework for thinking about how we may plan and lay out offices. The starting point of the project, if I just tell you a little bit about it, the starting point was actually a Herman Miller client, GlaxoSmithKline, saying that, you know, they couldn't understand why their head count was going up. They were employing more research scientists and more PhD chemists and more marketing people. But in their large facilities in the west of London, occupation rates in the office were going down. And they couldn't understand this. And of course, they realized that people were avoiding the office rather than working in it, which is a great drain on resource. So what's interesting is they were interested in understanding how and where people were really working and what they might really need to come into the office, because it was quite clear that there was a disjunction between what people really wanted in terms of destination and what they were providing, which was a kind of clean desk, lean working kind of machine. And so we set up a study. I worked with an architect called Benjamin Kozlowski, who's a new architecture graduate, probably taught by Kim at some stage. He studied 3 typical building types in London. And he did case studies on 3 typical organizations that would normally occupy that building type. So one was city fringe warehouse building converted into creative studio. And we looked at a company actually in the T building in Shoreditch. We looked in depth and did interviews and observations and day in the life and made films. And we had all kinds of visualization techniques to see what these people were doing. And then we looked at the classic post-war purpose-built office that you'll find around Paddington Station and around the South Bank. And we looked at an international business consulting firm of so the creative studio was about 60 people. The international business consulting firm was about 1,500 people. We did the same exercise there. And then we looked at an out-of-town major global telecommunications company in an out-of-London campus with about 6,000 people, and we did a similar methodology there. And we came up with a way of qualitatively scoring people's experiences of their environment. And so far, yes, there's lots of user studies done in offices. But at the same time, we developed a design framework. And we went right back. We didn't look at the history of office planning. We looked at the history of urban planning. We went right back to Kevin Lynch's work, Images of the City, 1960, about points and lines and boundaries and fences. And we looked in particular at Bernard Tschumy's work, planning Parc de la Villette in Paris in 1982. And we derived from all of this 4 guiding principles. One is programmable surface, and how you change surfaces and reprogram them and break down their scale. The second is points, social points. The third is large objects that would create landmark. And the fourth is circulation orientation. And we found a way of combining both the elements of the design framework with the user research. And we were able to go back to each of the 3 companies we'd studied, look at the key problems they'd had, and then reprogram the space using this new design framework. So this was done in partnership with Herman Miller and with GlaxoSmithKline and 2 other partners, Plantronics and the Bossons Group. And at the end of the study, we did a big masterclass at WorkTech at the British Library. And lots of companies came up to us and said, this is really interesting because you're trying to close the gap that we've thought about. And we really want you to test it. So since last autumn, we're doing 2 big case studies. One in Scotland in a hospital, in a healthcare environment, in a large PPI hospital environment, the Royal Forth Valley Hospital. We're taking a stretch of the hospital and we reprogram the space. And we're also working with the Royal Bank of Scotland on one of their landmark London buildings to see if this process works. I think underlying the project, and this is the nub of what we can talk about today, is we revealed, I think, the shortcomings and the dissatisfaction with what I describe as low choice, low segmentation, general open plan. The walls have been knocked down and people have been pushed into open plan space, but there is still there are huge problems. Not everybody finds that open plan space works for them. And I think the future is a retreat from this low choice for the user, low segmentation by the employer. There's going to be far more segmentation and there's going to be far more choice of where to work. And the landscaping of office spaces is going to become much more sophisticated. And I've just finished reading a fantastic book by Susan Cain called Quiet. And the subtitle is The Power of Introverts in a World That Won't Stop Talking. There's a wonderful section of the book which is all about the deficiencies of open plan space. And, and what she says is that not everybody is an extrovert. And she attacks what she calls the extrovert ideal of everybody talking and collaborating and life being one big brainstorm. She says that actually most people are quite introverted. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And most work is actually considerative and quiet and done on your own. Even if you're working in teams, there's a period where you've got to sit down and write a report or work something out. And whether you're a civil servant or an architect or in sales or whatever, there's a point where you've got to do your paperwork. Not everybody needs to be blabbing all the time. And I think we're going to see different types of office space. And I think that's what we're doing, working with Miller to try and kind of explore. In a way, Kim's work is all about, creating the products that would populate this new environment. We're about coming up with the strategic and theoretical basis of what this might look like. So I hope that gives you a bit of an insight into what we're doing.